Hello and welcome, and this is AIL TV. We are back again in full swing. This is Friday night, and this is Security Update. As you know, I am not the man to host Security Update, but I will introduce you to David Otto. Many of you know him already. Now, as you know, we have been covering a lot of Ethiopian issues, or we have hosted debates and stuff like that, and we are going to do it again. Tonight, we have got a very, very, very interesting guest. Again, David Otto will actually introduce them to you because this is his gig. But before we go to the program, I would like to play you a video which I recorded last week on bank holiday. This video was organized by Zelealem, the defense, is it defending movement for Ethiopia? If I have got it wrong, please, you will have to forgive me. But here is the video before we get into the conversation.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say officially welcome to the Ethio-Eritrean Peace Rally at Marble Arch in London. Thank you and welcome. You look beautiful. We are the people, we are Ethiopia. We are the people, we are Eritrea, civilized people with shared history and values. Welcome, welcome again. As you know, despite the negative campaign against this rally and despite the negative misinformation, we're all gathered here to pass a message of peace and stability and the value of peace and stability in the Horn of Africa. That's what we are. That's what we love, peace-loving people of Ethiopia and Eritrea.
Today we are here as Ethiopians and Eritreans to say no to neo-colonists. We are here to support what's happening in Ethiopia. Both Ethiopia and Eritrea have been portrayed as bad players in the Western world, but that's not the case. Both Ethiopia and Eritrea are helping one another to come out of the challenge Ethiopia is in right now.
For the first time in a long time, we have a government that actually listens to the people. But we also have outside influences that we want to tell that we Ethiopians and Eritreans support our government, and we would like our own opportunity to have a say without outside interference.
We Eritreans, as an Eritrean, me an Eritrean, I'm supporting the Ethiopian government and the peace enforcing mission because the TPLF who were in power in Tigray had kept the whole region hostage for the last 20 years. They started a border war with Eritrea, which was very bloody. About 100,000 soldiers died on both sides.
So, there you have it. And that was the video. As you could see that Ethiopians here in the UK, they're organizing themselves. They want peace. But I don't want to go on now. Let's go to David.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Thank you, viewers of Africa Security Update and Africans in London Television for this great session. Mr. Joseph, as you rightly said, today is another day for us to again go down to looking at the issues that Africa is facing in terms of security, in terms of how that has an impact on the economic and social development of the nation. And this program has been all about that. It's been all about us coming on board and bringing to you guests and specialists that have experienced some of the issues that are ongoing in Africa, and they come on this platform to express their opinions. They come to provide their own version of what they see as the solution to the problem. And again, today we will be diving very deep into the Horn of Africa. We'll be talking about Ethiopia. But before we talk about Ethiopia, it's important to note that since the defeat of the so-called Islamic State, but even before then, when the Islamic State was uprooted from Iraq and Syria, we've seen the amount of conflicts growing in Africa. We've seen the amount of instability that is growing in Africa. And this is not just as a result of the so-called fragile states that Africa does have. But the reasons behind that are deeper than the eyes can really see. So I think it's important as Africans to always have this kind of platform where people can come and analyze issues and provide very effective solutions. Again, talking about Africa, we know that there are huge issues all across Africa. It's not just Nigeria, which is the most populous nation in the world, in Africa. It's not just Ethiopia, which is the second most populous nation in Africa. It's all about different countries. Recently, we talked about the issues in Chad, where the president there, Idris Deby, was apparently killed on the front line. That has brought chaos into the Central Africa region. We talk about Mali with the Sahel, where you have jihadist issues there. Burkina Faso, where recently you had armed groups, carrying attacks in the southeastern part of the country, where it is very close to the region with Mali and Niger Republic. We talk about the instability that has occurred in Niger Republic, which is again the center of Africa. Nigeria, we know about the jihadist issues in the north, the banditry in the northwest, the growing secessionist movement in the south, and all other issues that are happening in the southeast region of the country. We talk about Cameroon, Mozambique, where terrorist organizations have risen in the northern part of the country, Libya, Somalia, where you have election issues, Central African Republic, DRC. And then we come to this issue which is ongoing in Ethiopia, which is all about the Ethiopian Defense Forces, when they declared what they referred to at the time as a law enforcement campaign against the northern region of Tigray. Now, what we've seen is that since November 2020, we've come to a point where this is 6 months into the crisis, and hundreds and thousands of people have been displaced. Some people say millions. Others have different versions. The UN says it's a humanitarian crisis. Now, whether these numbers are thousands or millions, as long as one person is impacted by a crisis or killed as a result of a crisis, it is still a humanitarian concern for the continent of Africa. And that is why we thought it was important for us to bring to you today a number of guests who can break down the issues, whether it be related to the internal dynamics within the country itself in Ethiopia, whether that be related to the regional dynamics, whether it's Eritrea, Sudan, or any other country that is being linked to the crisis, or whether there is an international dimension to this conflict, bearing in mind that Ethiopia was an upcoming country just very recently before the crisis, and that will have a significant impact in the economic stability of Ethiopia. So if Nigeria is having problems, Ethiopia is having problems, then the entire Africa is in big trouble. So we will break down these causes of the conflict, which is ongoing now for the past 6 months, into what are the local causes? Is it really the fact that the regional government of Tigray had invaded, as it's been said, they had attacked the Ethiopian Defense Forces in Tigray and had carted away weapons? Is it because they held elections when elections had been suspended? Is it really because of the direct declaration of a peacekeeping mission? Are these just immediate causes, or is there something much more historical than these causes? Do we have any regional implications? Does it have a role to play? Who is supporting the Ethiopian government, to continue with this war, which is clearly very devastating and very dirty? Who is also supporting the Tigray Liberation Forces? Who is behind them? Who is giving them arms and weapons? So we've got to really understand this, and speak to our audience, because one thing which we've always said very clearly is that you cannot have solutions when you don't understand the problem. You've got to be able to understand the problem so that we move away from misinformation, we move away from disinformation and from propaganda, and come up with an effective solution by identifying the problems that caused this war in the first place. So tonight I have three people here with me. I've got a lady, which you all must know today. You're going to hear from her. Her name is Wassy Tesfaye. She's a human rights activist, but also a member of the Global Ethiopian Advocacy Nexus. I think you'll hear from her this evening. She will talk to you about what are her own perspective as to what the root causes are, but more importantly, how they can be resolved. I've also got with me today Zelealem, who is one of the members or the founding members of the Defend Ethiopian movement. If I'm wrong, Zelealem, you correct me there. The gentleman that I've got with me today is Wassy Tesfaye. No, sorry, not Wassy Tesfaye. Maybe I've mistaken the names. Wassy Tesfaye and Tesfaye Eshetu. Yeah. So I would hear from all of you this evening, and let's start with you, Tesfaye Eshetu. Give us your own views as to what the causes are of this conflict that has been going on for the past 6 months. And I want you to use 2 minutes to tell us about the local causes, the regional causes, but also the international implications and how you think this can be resolved. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, David, for first of all inviting me to your program on the security issues and the economic and political and social ramifications of the crisis in Tigray region of Ethiopia. And I wouldn't call it actually a war, because it's a law enforcement the government reacting, in fact, to the brutal attack against the Ethiopian National Defense Forces on the 4th of November by the TPLF against soldiers who were tirelessly actually supporting farmers. And when they come back, actually, that was just an ambush, a preemptive attack, as the TPLF admitted it. But that's not I would not actually rest to put the cause to one night incident, but the simmering situation over the last 3 years prior to actually the November 2020 actually should be mentioned here, because what the TPLF was removed, in fact, was a popular uprising. They governed for nearly 3 decades. The Ethiopian people was iron fist. The young from the Oromia region, Keros, the Amara regions, Fanos, and then after that, from other parts of Ethiopia actually came out in droves, in fact, being killed still actually, regardless of that, opposing it to the government. Finally, actually, that it has to be removed. But what has been since it was removed from the central government and being still administering the Tigray region was very clandestine, cunning plan to come back, in fact, unseat the central government. That was actually seen particularly after the law enforcement operation. Now, the government took actually the law enforcement operation. Did it have actually a mandate, in fact, to do so? Yes, from whom? The people of Ethiopia. And then did it have a mandate again actually from the House of People's Representatives? Yes, indeed, it was instructed, because it's a heinous attack of a high treasonous order, and then the government had no option. If it was actually the United Kingdom, and if you're the United States of America, there would be a reverberating attack, in fact, against those actually perpetrated such a crime. But the TPLF, in fact, to unseat the government clandestinely, operating for the last 3 years, so it's not quietly sitting there. They were waiting actually for the time to come and strike. That's exactly what they did. And then if you look at actually how much they have been prepared, 80% of the high-ranking military was still in their hands. The security apparatus was still in their hands. And then the 70 to 80% of the weaponry of Ethiopia was actually in their hands in the Northern Command. Systematically, they organized themselves to come back and unseat, as they said, within 10 days actually to come to Addis. And in fact, as a manifesto pledge in 1976, to create the greater Tigray, and then by attacking Eritrea as well. So there's no qualm about it. There's no qualm about it. And fairly and squarely, we can really designate the cause of this is TPLF, and then their clandestine operation until the 4th of November. It's not just simply that. There was the government trying in between this time to resolve it peacefully? Yes, indeed. Yes. Some covertly, some openly, publicly, the government tried actually to solve it. Not only the government, the people themselves, high-ranking religious leaders. Like we have respect. Ethiopia has respect for the elders and the leaders. They went actually begging them. Women went actually begging them, but they were not actually budging. So what was actually emboldened them was, now we know, because they have amassed weapons and the rest of it, apart from actually, the Air Force. They had actually everything at their disposal, and they were working, in fact, tirelessly. But they say it is too late, in fact, to negotiate with the Ethiopian, the federal government, but undermining the central government, and also actually they had contacts with other countries. Writing letters to African, to Eritrea, and the rest of it. So practically, the constitutional place of the federal government was shaken and undermined by TPLF. And then what else would have the government actually would have done?
So let me come to you, Mr. Tesfaye. Let me come to you, because you've made some very important points, which I think is important to perhaps clarify a little bit. Before the Ethiopian National Defense Force and the Prime Minister launched what he called law enforcement, it may have been a law enforcement, but after 6 months, and with what has been ongoing at the moment, do you still call it law enforcement? Because clearly, from my understanding of conflicts, this is a civil war. Is my own label wrong?
I wouldn't call it actually a civil war, to be honest with you, because the Tigrayan, we have to make a distinction between TPLF and the Tigrayan people, who are our brothers and sisters. There's no civil war at all. It is a government still trying actually to enforce the law. Let me tell you, this is a skirmish attack now, guerrilla warfare, hit and run, and then ruining actually the infrastructure. TPLF is reduced to the remnants of the marshal in caves. The leadership either captured or killed, or actually just a couple of them actually in the cave, and with some military. So they are doing actually insurgency, a guerrilla fight. You cannot call actually that a civil war. There's no any, like the Oromos, for that matter, the Amaras attacking, or the Afars, the Somalis attacking Tigrayans. No, they will not. Tigrayans are our brothers and sisters. We have to distinguish between TPLF. A civil war is actually one against the other. It's not. The government has a responsibility, by the way, with a mandate from the House of the People of Representatives. So it has a mandate. It has no option. There's no civil war.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me come to you first. Zelealem, I'll get back to you in a minute. Let me speak to Wassy Tesfaye, because Tesfaye Eshetu has made it very clear that this is a law enforcement engagement. But we know, and the Prime Minister has accepted that Eritreans, military forces have been on ground. We also know that some of the Amhara militias, as they call them, correct me if I'm wrong, have been involved in the conflict. Now, that doesn't qualify as law enforcement, in my opinion. Wassy, do you think that we're still at that point? And besides that, what do you see as your own causes of this crisis? Over to you.
Okay, thank you. Just before I go into that, I do want to say one little thing about how this started, because what's very, very important is TPLF, when they came to power, their plan was to rule the country by ethnic division. So they had this ethnic federalism, by which they divided the people up into different ethnic groups. We all know that. And then the plan was either we rule or we destroy this country. I have never heard of any government coming anywhere in Africa or anywhere else making a bipolar plan like the TPLF. That's what they did with Ethiopia. They had this bipolar plan. So that's very, very important to know. So in the course of this, yes, the government did admit that Eritreans were there. And I think any government has the right to call in help from other people if they want to. I mean, it's been done all over the world. All of a sudden, people are saying, oh my God, why did Ethiopia do this? So that is one question. But the other thing, when we talk about the Amhara militia, it's the division, the way TPLF set up the whole system in the country. But when you think about what they call the so-called Amhara militia, what they call Western Tigray, those are Amhara people. That's not Tigray. That's even people from time immemorial where the Amhara people lived. So the closest people you have to work with the federal army were the Amhara. They're in their homeland. I always find it funny when they say Amhara militia out of Tigray. So they didn't come from anywhere. They're Ethiopians. Not only are they Ethiopians, they're also Ethiopians from that region. So this is another point I'd like to make. And then to go back to, is this a civil war or isn't it?
Wassy, let me ask you a question. I'm not cutting you off.
Okay,
but I'm just, so you can, you mentioned, and you agree with everyone that agrees that, you had the Eritrean forces involved.
Yes.
And you're very correct. Any government can call any country, when there's trouble. But do you do that with law enforcement? Or, I mean, I've not heard of that. The point I'm trying to make is that even though this was law enforcement in the beginning of the process, this is no longer law enforcement. I mean, that's the point I'm trying to make. Am I wrong still?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, you are wrong, because it is still law enforcement, and it is like Tesfaye said before, just right now, that they are still involved in fighting this guerrilla. And what we should not forget is what the TPLF was a ruler or a dictatorship or a government that was very much repressive towards the Tigrayan people, even more so. Like when you had during the PRDF period some kind of press freedom, the rest of Ethiopia, TPLF, not in Tigray, nothing. So they were totally under the foot of the TPLF. And the people are very much frightened of the TPLF. They are also really scared. Are they coming back or are they not? So they're very underspoken, very much so. So that is one thing. But the other thing that I believe happened is also because TPLF has all this support from outside organizations, outside countries. I mean, it's just unbelievable how much support. And because I always like to talk about it, we should never forget this, their access to money. They took out, as you know, about $30 to $50 billion on hard currency out of Ethiopia. That money is useful for them in many ways, not only to do their propaganda and their Twitter wars or buying lobbyists and what have you, but also buying armaments and recruitments and those kinds of things. So I think all that is also playing a role right now. See, what we should not forget is when they destroyed the infrastructure, their main reason for destroying the infrastructure in Tigray was so that what's happening right now does not end. when they destroy the bridges, when they destroy the airport, when they destroy the telecommunication of the country, these are some of the things that they were thinking about, and that is working to keep this what's happening right now to prolong it, and that is what we're experiencing right now.
Okay. Zelealem, let me hear your version. You've listened to Wassy and Tesfaye. Can you come in?
Right. I just start from the very premises. What is the origin of the conflict? I think that's what's on the poster of this program. And to me, Ethiopia is not unique about this problem. Don't forget, this is a country that's transitioning from an authoritarian, ethnocentric regime into democracy. Okay, so when the lead was opened, this is common knowledge for the last 27 years. Okay, the facade of it might look that this is like a democratically elected government. This is common knowledge. The whole world knows that the only place that you can find, right, a non-democratic state in the rest of the world is probably in Northern Korea. Okay? 99.6% of the House of Representatives seat is taken by one party. So how could that be a democracy in a country of 110 million, right? So Ethiopians revolted and sacrificed it for 27 years, and then the TPLF regime was overthrown. The problem now, what we have is the TPLF could not sort of come to terms with the fact that they have got all the power, the importance, and the leverage that they have for 110 million people. Hence, they had to fight back. Their way of fighting back is defying the authority of the federal government. The federal government, as in Prime Minister's Abiy government, has made every effort to say, look, whatever you have looted, whatever you have killed has been sort of given mercy. The Ethiopian people have forgiven you for that, but you need to come into the fold. But they could not. And on this, I will add probably a systematic plan by the West to fragilize Ethiopia and to destabilize it, which is going on up to today's date. Okay? So that is really the simmering origin or the current sort of underlying. The attack of the Ethiopian Defense Forces is that simply the last straw. Yeah, of course. That's what was sort of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed or any other leader would call red line, that they crossed the red line at that point. But things were building to that point. The number of military parades has happened in Tigray, in the capital, okay, over the last 6 months before. This is a show of force. You think that Kim Il-sung is doing a military show in Korea. That's what it looks like. But in any case, so the conflict started and they sort of lost, right? In an unexpected way. So they could not accept. Something is happening to my screen. I don't know if it's me or...
I think you're fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So they couldn't accept that defeat. Okay. Still, there was an opportunity. Okay. Some of them are left to determined to sort of guerrilla fight and make this a war of attrition. How long did it take for Osama bin Laden to be captured? For the mighty power of the Americans? I would say probably 2 years or something like that.
Yes.
Not that I want this to go on and on, because the fact that conflict itself is still going on, lack of stability in that country and that region means there is a lot of opportunity cost, politically, economically, and socially, right? And in terms of the integration and the peace, reconciliation for that region is significant. We don't want that to carry on. Unfortunately, we are where we are. So yes, it is still a law enforcement operation, yeah, because it is not like one it's not like the whole population is fighting against the government. It's a contingent of criminals, right, who have put themselves into a cage or into wherever, right? And they're trying to regroup, and they're trying to fight back themselves into power. These are people despised by the Tigrayans themselves. Let me tell you about for instance, the sexual violence that the West is sort of propagating a lot about, among many other things. 6 months before TPLF was overthrown, there was a number of attempts for demonstrations against sexual violence in Tigray, which was curbed by the TPLF people. And there were tens of thousands of rapists and murderers who have been sort of imprisoned in Mekelle. What kind of sort of a civilized, right, and a well-thinking leader would be releasing all those people? And what do you expect that what would happen to women and to girls, if you're releasing about thousands rapists and murderers into a city where even law enforcement itself is taking only baby steps? There's only an interim government. It's not a stable city or a stable region. So that would continue happening. So yes, as prolonged, it's still a law enforcement operation. We would, all Tigrayans and the Ethiopians would like it to come to an end as quickly as possible. But one of the other reasons that it's taking longer is, I wouldn't rule this out. Probably the West, the way, if you join the dots, okay, as to what the West is doing in terms of blonding even the remnants that are remained in Tigray region or of TPLF, I wouldn't rule out probably they must have given them the wink or the green light that you go and attack the Ethiopian Defense Forces, we will come to your rescue. I wouldn't rule that out, by the way. Okay?
Yes,
So
Mrs. Zelealem, yes,
that's the issue.
yeah, that's a very good analysis. Now, you know, when as a leader of a country, when you're doing your estimate of war or your estimate of law enforcement, shouldn't you be able to take those kind of elements into consideration? That, so for example, if the Ethiopian Defense Forces, you know, launch a law enforcement engagement, as you call it, in Tigray, there will be support from the outside, which would then prolong the war. Isn't that supposed to be part of the estimate of war that the Ethiopian government, you know, should have made?
Well, you're right, absolutely. Sort of, this is in the best will of the world, okay? You could be estimating or you could be planning as to what would happen on when. Let me ask you, David, sort of, how many
Yes.
times have the Nigerian government has planned in terms of eradicating Boko Haram? Okay, how many times have they been successful in doing that? Boko Haram is still rampant operating despite the might of the Nigerian military and government. Okay? But the other thing is, systematically, Ethiopian military armament and military forces have 80% of it. 80% of it was held in that region. And they did whatever they need to do in terms of no military commander would be taking any orders from the federal government. Okay, that point. So, hence, it was, in fact, it is really, I mean, I don't want to sort of give him the sort of probably the shining credit for it, but I think in terms of military planning, probably, yeah, the mighty power of the TPLF, which has been like as if they are the Alexander the Great's army, they have crumbled like a house of cards. That would be, in my view, it's the ingenuity of military planning by Abiy. Yeah, that brought
And
those
David,
things.
and I'd like to add to that, David. I mean,
Yes,
because
yes. Let me just answer his question a little bit quickly. In
okay.
terms of you know, as somebody who understands this subject matter when it comes to defense, you know, it's all one of the advice that we give, and this applies to Nigeria as well. Is that when you're planning to engage in any battle, civil, local, or international, or regional, you've got to be able to understand your enemy's capacity or capability or the kind of support that your enemy can get. That will give you an estimate as to how long this kind of engagement is going to take. And I think, it was underestimated, by the Ethiopian government. It is not to say that the engagement was wrong, but it's to say that the planning was faulty, if there was a plan at all in terms of understanding the capacity or the length of this war. But let me come to you, Tesfaye, before I come to Wassy. Go ahead.
Okay, David, I think that's where we depart, to be honest with you. Had it been a planned attack by the Ethiopian government, I would have agreed totally actually with you. There was no any plan. It was a surprise attack by the TPLF. Therefore, the government reacted rather than actually the other way around. So now, in terms of planned execution, let me take you to Somalia, where Americans actually involved. How many years has it taken them? Al-Shabaab is still there, live and kicking, in fact, in big ways. Let me take you to Syria, where Americans have got involved still. Was there any resolution? Let me take you to Afghanistan. For nearly actually 2 decades, the Americans got involved. Has they resolved the problem? No. Now, when you look at it, the Ethiopian government were not prepared. The Ethiopian people were not prepared actually for any kind of war. It was a provoked, preemptive attack by TPLF. If at all, who was prepared actually for this war? Only and only TPLF, to be honest with you. But now, let me give you this one. Unequivocally, they are reduced to being actually, bandits. So in any country, you will have bandits. And then bandits actually, you need to follow a law and order, in fact, in order actually to chase them up. That's actually where they are. Now, I will bring actually the international mix here. Now, those bandits, look at this. The Amharas or the Afars did not go to attack Tigray. They have never even stepped into the Tigray region. Who is now ruling Tigrayans? If you talk about actually civil war, it is entirely the administration. The administration is Tigrayans and Tigrayans. The only Tigrayans who were non-partisan to TPLF. They were rejected. It is not just the Ethiopian people. They governed with iron fist. It is the Tigrayan people who suffered. Now they have the opportunity to govern themselves once in their history. There you are. Now, so there's no civil war. The Americans did, the Amharas didn't go actually to their territory. No, the Afars didn't go to their territory. Rather, the Samris who killed in Makadra 1,300 innocent Amharas and the rest of them, killed them, cold-blooded. Now, where are they actually? In the Sudan. They are retraining to the insurgents. So what kind of plan actually could you have made? If the government was actually so patiently, to be honest with you, even to the annoyance of the people, I must say, in Ethiopia, so patiently wanted actually to have a peaceful resolution actually to that. But they went actually to the election, David, that you know of. That's actually against the constitution, against the instruction given. The highest body is actually the House of People's Representatives. What did they do? They just poo-pooed that and then went ahead actually with their election, which is now actually absolutely nothing. Imagine all these planned by TPLF, but the government was not actually prepared for any war at all. It is reacting, in fact, to the situation. Therefore, to have actually bandits and follow bandits is not actually is not unique actually to Ethiopia. And everywhere you can see it, whether it's just in Sudan, the Somali and African. A typical case is actually, David, from your own country, which we share, in fact. You have actually Boko Haram. We have actually TPLF. To be honest with you, the world must really admit this. It's a very swift conclusion. It didn't even take 3 weeks. 3 weeks to attack them. The core conflict was ended actually, in the first 3 weeks of the operation.
So what you're saying, yeah. if I may understand, is that the TPLF had a plan, but the Ethiopian government didn't know about the plan. Which
absolutely, of course, without a shadow of doubt. Yes, let me give you actually the plan.
Which, of course, is also a failure of intelligence, and that is something which we'll talk about another time. But the point I'm making is that for a government like Ethiopia that understands the history of the Tigray region, the history of its people, and understand the doubt that the government should have known that there is an underlying plan going on to push the government to this point. I mean, if they didn't know that, then it also raises concerns. Yeah, go ahead, Tesfaye.
Yeah, on the issue of security, I may actually tend to agree with you, but let me give you this. Who was actually 250? The security apparatus were all TPLFs at the time. The government, yeah, they were actually all removed afterwards. They were all passing all this information. 80% from 50% to 80% of high-ranking officials were still, until the operation, by the way, they're all from TPLF. Don't mix that with actually Tigrayans. It's not because they are Tigrayans. It's TPLF, core TPLF, hardcore TPLF members. In the security apparatus also, they were actually there. Therefore, to be honest with you, the government, once actually it reorganized the security apparatus and the rest of its structure under the military, you see actually the fruit of that recently. Yes, I mean, if I say actually that, well, they don't have actually the knowledge of actually TPLF, operating and systematically actually planning actually to attack. Yeah, you know what they did? When the government actually knew something about what is wrong, and they sent actually someone to oversee the Northern Command, the TPLF returned. They sent that person actually back. So yeah, on the security grounds, because it was hijacked by TPLF. TPLF were emboldened by having actually the military high-ranking officials, plus the armament, plus in fact controlling actually the security. There's no doubt about it. To be honest with you, did you hear actually, probably if you haven't actually heard what the Prime Minister has said, the first few months, probably weeks, he was actually practically in house arrest. Although actually there was a transition. Although there is a reform process, he was practically in house arrest. They were monitoring every single movement of his. He was allowed actually to his office. They lock him in his house. That was frightening, to be honest with you.
We'll come to that. We'll come to that. Let me listen to. Let's hear from Wassy, because I think she wants to say something. Wassy, go ahead.
Well, I think Tesfaye said most of it, but I do want to say one thing. We cannot say that the Ethiopian government was completely oblivious to that, because if they were, they wouldn't have been sending elders to negotiate for them. They wouldn't be doing the internal diplomacy that they were trying to do. None of that would have happened. And also, you cannot fault a government for not knowing these things. I mean, so they're not perfect. The security is not perfect. So, and that's okay. That's okay. But one example I do want to give you is the example of the North and the South. When Lincoln went to war with the South, that's exactly what happened. The South went and took Fort Sumter, where the Union soldiers were. That was the cause of the war. And that took Lincoln, I don't know how many years, the Civil War in America. So this should not be any surprise to any of us. And I think what is very, very interesting is to know that it only takes 3 weeks to defeat such a strong armed section or sector of the society. So I think these are the things that we really need to look at and focus on. And then the other interesting thing also is, whereas Boko Haram does not have the support that TPLF has, TPLF is supported by the whole Western world right now, by the Western press. And we even say they won the media war, while the Ethiopian army won the real war. Well, not war, but the law enforcement action within Ethiopia. So I think these are some of the things that we have to look at when we discuss this. So this is all I have to say for this particular.
And in terms of let's talk about solutions now. I understand that you stick to your point in terms of saying this is a law enforcement intervention. This is no civil war, or it's not a war between the Tigray region and the Ethiopian government. there are people who may disagree. There are people who think, it's what you're saying. So, you've got two sides. Now, what is the solution? Because I think that is what each and everyone is talking about. Now, if you don't deal with the real causes, you can't find a solution. Is that correct? And what is your solution to this, Wassy?
Well, I think this thing is very, very complex. And I don't think there's one really easy solution. But right now, what I think we have ahead of us are the elections. I think the elections are very, very critical, because if the elections do happen, when the elections do happen, and they address this totally discriminatory constitution, which is really the issue in Ethiopia right now, I think that would be a step forward for a solution. Then I think people can elect democratically who they want. I think ethnic politics has to go. Ethnic politics was never the politics of Ethiopia. Ethnic politics was something that the TPLF put on our people. They built it while they were in fighting, and they brought it as their ethnic and constitution. And that is what the people have been working under. And what this has done is this has separated the people. This has made people think that the other, diversity is a problem instead of it being something that we celebrate. Because, and the reason why I say this is this: we know that ethnic politics has been something that has been throughout Africa, supported also by the West and by the colonialists. And I just want to go back a little bit into Ethiopian history. Ethiopia was the first and only country in the world where Islam and Christianity lived peacefully for millennia without war against each other, because they were allowed to, because that was the policy of the country. And so there have been civil strifes and what have you, but most of it has been because of a power struggle. Who's going to be in power? Who's going to be doing what? That's what was prevailing in Ethiopia. And so this thing about ethnic politics, we know that every time there's a colonial wish or dream around Ethiopia, they come with ethnic politics. They come with ethnic politics because they're used to dividing people by that. And so when the TPLF, when they came to power, they brought that ethnic politics so that they can rule as an ethnic minority. They did not trust the democratic process, that people would choose them and elect them for good governance. They wanted that, and they kept people separated from one another, and that's how they instituted that. So our thing right now is getting rid of that and letting the democratic process prevail. And I know it's easier said than done. I'm not blind to what's happening, all the other things that are happening in Ethiopia, but I think this is the way. This is the way to start.
Zelealem, let me come to you. The Prime Minister and the Ethiopian government has made it clear that they've won the law enforcement, as you call it. How do you win the peace?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a good question. Not only sort of the conflict, but you need to win the peace. In terms of winning the peace at the moment, in Tigray region, I mean, by the way, there are a number of issues in Ethiopia currently going on concurrently. I mean, the Tigray issue is one issue. There are other issues. There is the dam issue. There is the border issue with Sudan. So, in terms of northern Ethiopia or in Tigray region, the imminent sort of issue is about handling the humanitarian crisis, okay? Which I understand, according to sort of the press release that I have seen this morning, about 2.8 million of Tigray people have access to humanitarian aid. And it's about bringing back the people who were displaced into their location. The government is trying to level best strengthen the interim government in Tigray so that there is some sort of semblance of normality. Okay? And I mean, for the people or the TPLF, I'm not sort of that foolish that to think that it will disappear into thin air like that. Wouldn't. But they need to think hard in terms of is the way they want to resolve, if they care really about the people of Tigray and the region, okay, in my view, choices in their hand as to what they want to do about it. So, but the government has to do the right thing: respect for human rights, respect for freedom of expression, about feeding people, about sort of bringing back the displaced people. That is how you win the peace on the ground, and show that the people are not the problem. It is the leaders who have basically taken the region, which has got a lot going for itself. Okay, most Ethiopians would sort of, if you ask them, they would say, "Wow, for the last sort of 20 years or 25 years, a lot of wealth has been pilfered from Ethiopia, develop one region." But nobody is going to be making that issue, right? There's a lot going for it, but it needs to stand sort of on its feet and sort of restore its own peace. That is what the Ethiopian government is doing. And the West, if they are really sort of interested in stability of the Horn of Africa, which Ethiopia is very prominent in that region, and I would say the bridge that has been built between Ethiopia and Eritrea in terms of peace alliance through the peace accord is something that needs to be worked on and strengthened so that there is long-term stability in that region.
Thank you for that. Let me come to you, Tesfaye. We've seen all the figures that the UN has given in terms of humanitarian crisis. They've talked about pumping billions. We've seen condemnations. Is this typical to the UN? And do you see this as some kind of postponing the resolution to this crisis, making it worse or making it better? And is this something that the Ethiopian government is going to welcome?
No, I would not say actually. The Ethiopian government is quite open in terms of supporting the humanitarian crisis. Let me bring this fact to you. The Ethiopian government, out of its meager resources, has spent $1 billion, so far $1 billion US. The West talk the talk, but they didn't walk the walk. Only 30% of actually the humanitarian support comes actually from outside. Laughable. Laughable, I tell you. It's laughable. What they're trying to do is the first time when they try actually to send humanitarian support, they try to smuggle out actually the criminals. That's what they did, to be honest with you. So the Ethiopian government has actually the responsibility for that matter actually to look after its own interest. Now, these criminals, which we are talking about, they should not leave actually this country. Otherwise, actually, it's not discharging its responsibility. So where is the money actually? Now, there are credible organizations like World Food Programme, for that matter, to be honest with you, who are quite helpful, reporting as it is actually from the ground. If the others actually would follow. Now, it's not just the humanitarian aspect, by the way, David. The European Union, they were saying actually they would support the election process. Now they pulled that out of the observation. The fledgling democracy. We do not expect them actually to support the fledgling democracy. The first time Ethiopia has seen a roadmap toward this democracy. Should that not be actually supported by the European Union? No. Let me tell you, in terms of the way forward, in terms of, I don't pretend actually to have a magic wand, but what I can say here is because there is an international major players as well playing. So we should continue. Ethiopia should continue with this reform process in the first place. The election process actually has to go bar Tigray until the time is right actually for Tigray to have its election, because the Tigrayan people should feel that they own the process and they manage themselves, because the current temporary executive is appointed by the government. That should change. I totally agree with Wassy. To be honest, the evils of all evils is the constitution itself, particularly that laid actually to the self-determination after secession. That has to be dealt with. Not only that, the special forces, which is unique to Ethiopia, which is a recipe for disaster, has to be actually removed. And then all these special forces, probably actually in the region of 1 million, to be honest with you, if you add up all, they should be part and parcel of the Ethiopian National Defense Force, which is a formidable army actually to challenge actually outsiders. I wish actually I could go through. There was no be any negotiation. The TPLF being labeled, designated as a terrorist now, very recently in Ethiopia. Now that there's no way, and being actually a different remnants, there is no way that there will be negotiation. The West are insisting to negotiate because to resuscitate TPLF from smoldering ash and to make it one that's live, because those who were actually in Obama administration helping and supporting each other, they are reappear and re-emerged in Biden's administration to resuscitate TPLF. That's not going to happen. That's not the way forward. Let's give the Tigrayan people to govern themselves, free from the yoke of TPLF. That's actually the solution. And the Ethiopian government actually should continue, whichever color of government comes, should continue with the reform process, and democracy should prosper.
Thank you for that, Mr. Tesfaye. I think you mentioned the issue of the Constitution, of course, which makes it very clear that there is a right to self-determination and secession, subject to a referendum, of course. Changing the Constitution is something that requires, the universal suffrage, and the process has to be, done rightly, because if you do it wrongly, then you come back to, the same, position in another form. So I think, that should be looked into very, very carefully. Now, Mr. Joseph, you had a question. Go ahead.
Thank you, gentlemen. I know you have presented your case very well. I always want to put things in a very simplistic way. What I have seen is that negotiation through international peace treaties and international intervention is not really bearing fruits. I want to know, are there some kind of grassroots organizations in Ethiopia? Say, for example, you bring the elders, you bring the religious groups to discuss. So, because you see, this is our belief. This is our problem. We should solve it our own. We don't have to go to Saudi Arabia to seek advice. We don't have to go to even to the United Nations. In fact, I gave up on the United Nations a long time ago. I don't know what is that. Is there any grassroots organizations which can actually bring the two people? Now, forget about the TPLF, forget about the Ethiopian government. We say we are talking as Ethiopians. So what would you suggest, you as academics? So right now, I'm actually holding you as academics because you present your case very well. You know your history. You know the facts. What do you think would be the solution? In fact, I'm adding on to David's question, solution.
Yeah.
Wassy, can you take that, please?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll start. I'll try. So there are grassroots efforts happening in Ethiopia, and we see that religious leaders are coming together, like Muslim leaders are coming together, Orthodox leaders are coming together, Muslim women, Christian women. We see that all over Ethiopia coming up, saying that they want peace, and they want to live peacefully and their children and to thrive. So that is happening. Now, personally, I don't know, maybe Zelealem Tessema can talk more about that, how the government is connecting with the grassroots organizations. But I do want to say one thing, JJ, what I think part of what the problem was for the international community is that Ethiopia is trying to solve it very much locally, like African problems, African solutions. For instance, when Isaias Afwerki and Abiy Ahmed walked through the streets together, there was not one white international negotiator. That was something that came out of these two countries, out of the need to have peace in the country. And now they're making peace with Somalia also. So the Horn of Africa is creating its peace. What does the UN do? The US do right now? They're sending an envoy who's really a war maker to create peace in the Horn of Africa, where people are already creating peace. So I think part of that is also a threat to the West when people take their own solutions and really come up with good and viable resolutions. That's just my piece to this.
Thank you very much for that, Wassy. I think you make a very good point in the sense that Africans must be able to promote. We must be able to promote African solutions to African problems. That is not to say that we are uninterested in partnership to solutions, but that is to say that African countries, i.e., Ethiopia, any other country, they've got the capacity that they require. And I think one important aspect is for our leaders, in quotes, to begin to recognize that grassroots and local stakeholders can take the leadership, and be heard in terms of problem solutions perspective. Zelealem, what is your thought on the AU or any local initiative that can step in and be respected by both sides, maybe as a mediator or some kind of, a go-between? Do you see any at this point?
I think Ethiopia is open for anything, okay? Open in the sense that provided that it is legitimate, it would bring long-lasting peace, okay? But who do you negotiate with, and who are the negotiators is the question here, okay? Who are you negotiating with? If you have labeled a certain group of people who are causing chaos in their sort of regional area or sort of for the whole country, right? Would you be negotiating? And especially now, as Tesfaye told sort of the session, I think it was yesterday or so, the House of Representatives of the House of Parliament in Ethiopia have basically labeled the TPLF as being a terrorist organization. But by the way, this is not the first time. TPLF is already in the global terrorist list already. Okay?
Yeah.
This is not new. But despite
No, sorry,
that,
you mean in the global terrorist list, or you mean it's been labeled as a terrorist organization in Ethiopia? Because that has to be made
No,
to be
no, no,
clearer.
no, no. Globally, in the state, the global terrorist organizations list since 1974 has been registered at that. But the hope is that it has redeemed, and it has. I mean, the people have become statesmen, kind of thing. So and nobody sort of wants to talk about that. That is sort of like an old sort of ghost or history. But unfortunately, the internal DNA of the people who are leading that organization are still there, and hence their sort of true color and belligerence is still making them commit a terrorist action against their own people, against their own country. Okay? So hence negotiation, unfortunately, is not there. I mean, the Ethiopian government, in my view, has given a number of chances. Okay? During this law enforcement, there were a number of, I think about 2 or 3 kind of truce parades where they were given a chance, sort of, you would be treated fairly and you won't be harmed. You need to sort of surrender yourself to the law enforcing authorities. But they wouldn't want to take that. I mean, it's either we die and take the region down with ourselves. So in that sense, I don't see sort of a lot of scope in terms of, if we're talking about simply Tigray, or something to be negotiated, and who is going to be negotiated with anyway. Okay? Otherwise, I mean, it would make a mockery of the decision of the people's representatives to say that today you are defining somebody as a terrorist organization and terrorist people, and then tomorrow, that you would be negotiating with them. I'm not saying it hasn't happened in history, but I think it's too soon to think about that kind of thing.
Mrs. Zelealem, I get your point. You make a very good point. I'll come to you, Tesfaye.
Okay.
One of the challenge, and this is something which I often talk to African leaders, is that when you have an internal conflict or a law enforcement, when you begin to move the label to a point at which it blocks any possibility of negotiation, then the counter effect is that you're prolonging the war or you're prolonging the crisis. It becomes very dangerous, to move the level to a point at which negotiations or dialogue, becomes, impossible to have. And I think, that is something which the Ethiopian government needs to think about very carefully, in order for us not to have other elements of this conflict, taking the name that is been given. Because when you start talking about a terrorist organization, then it becomes to act like one. And that is not, and it will not be in the interest of Ethiopia or in the interest of the Horn of Africa or Africa at large. So I think that has to be taken, with a very huge amount of caution. Mr. Tesfaye, let me come to you. What are your last thoughts on this?
I think my last thoughts would be, Wassy mentioned earlier on, and Zelealem also, in terms of, I think the question which JJ actually raised is fundamentally, as an African and as an Ethiopian, that's where our strength lies. Grassroots. It comes actually as natural, by the way, actually, to have grassroots elders actually going in mediating and the rest of it. That's exactly what happened during the last 3 years prior to the attack in November. The elders, the patriarch, the chief of the Islam, the Protestants and the Catholics, and then was notable VIPs from all over Ethiopia. They went to Mekelle. That's the capital of the
Tigray region, yes. Yeah.
Absolutely begged Debrecen. And then not only that, women who cried, they went actually to his office and say, "You are too late." That's the answer. Repeatedly, actually, they got. So negotiation when? Now from the position of weakness, it's not just simply a position of weakness, but the position of nothingness. Now you cannot have actually that government. One time, 1 week actually, as Zelealem said, decides, okay, that's just a terrorist organization. It satisfies all this criteria. The next week actually you say that let's negotiate. They had been given ample opportunities.
Okay, let's forget about what has been given.
To negotiate. But when it comes, yes. David, when it comes to, there's one thing, in fact, I should say, people to people healing has to start. The mistrust, because of the disinformation, misinformation, that is actually infiltrated into the people. Yes. I want actually say, the Ethiopian people, Amharas with Tigrayans, they are not enemies, but they are trying to portray them as enemies. The Oromos and the Amharas, that's the healing process actually where it does. Let me tell you what, the Gamu people went with their leaves in their hands, and then they have made actually pledges with the elders of the Oromo people. Now, there is no, people to people are heart to heart, they are together. But these people trying to portray as if actually they are enemies, that should stop. And I totally agree with you. This is in a very traditional way. As a God-fearing person myself, to be honest with you, Ethiopia is a God-fearing, by and large, people. Then we have to come out to our senses. And then, in fact, actually just filter out those who are, to be honest with you, when we talk about TPLF, sometimes people give it actually a big name. It is from one part of Tigray, that's Adwa. And even within the Adwa, it's just one family. Just one family. Why should we get ransomed by one family, to be honest with you? It's not the people of Tigray. Now, heart to heart, healing process has to start. When healing process, what I mean, it's not vis-a-vis the central government. It is people to people. The mistrust, misinformation, disinformation, even, but in one sense, actually, one thing came out of this is, and then the diaspora community, who would thought actually 2 years ago, let alone actually, 5-10 years ago, that Eritreans and the Ethiopians you would come together and, come out actually the way that the manner actually they come. That's a healing process is started. Who started, to be honest, with the Ethiopian Eritrean healing process? The Prime Minister himself. It was the astonishment of Debretsion. He said to him, I could not believe actually you went to Asmara. We tried for years and years. We were not successful, but you are now successful. And you called him Esu. No, in short, to call him Isaias. Look, Sudan would have been actually in a serious trouble by now had it not been for the Prime Minister who went there. I still remember when the Prime Minister went to the Sudan, to Khartoum, he had a rapturous welcome because he brought them actually together. You need to give actually credit where it is due. That's the Southern Sudan is exactly the same. Somalia is exactly the same. So we have built-in culture of really resolving our problems in this manner. But TPLF is an ingrained culture is to depart from that, because they are okay.
Yeah, thank you for that. I can't do this without giving the last word to Wassy. I thank you so much for your contribution. Put it this way, men began this conflict. Can women resolve it? Just 1 minute.
Yes, well, you are speaking my language. You are speaking my language. I will just tell you one story, and it's true, and it happened right now. When this conflict started, I called my cousin, who's a nun in Debre Libanos, which is in Shah. She's an Amara nun there. And I asked her, what's happening in Aksum? Is what they're saying in Aksum true? And you know what she told me? They contacted a nun in Aksum, a Tigrian nun in Aksum, and asked her, is this happening? What is happening over there? And what she told them was, young men fought against the government, and some killing did happen, but there's no massacre here. So what I'm trying to say is, and this is really very, very true. I mean, it just touches my heart when I talk about it. So I do believe that women do bring people together, and that we are more down to earth, and we care about life. I know men care about life too, but men are also kind of proud or something else. And so I think, yes, women can heal and can bring this about together. But in this particular case, I think we all have to work together. And in this particular case, I think Ethiopia would find her own solution to these issues if the international community will support her in doing this, or if they can't do that, stay out of it and just leave it to the locals.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Wassy Tesfaye. Thank you very much, Tesfaye Eshetu and Mr. Zelealem. We hope that Ethiopia would resolve this crisis, this law enforcement, this civil war, depending on which side of the fence you're sitting, and that there will be an effective and long-lasting solution to this. But we want this as Africans, to be resolved as soon as possible. The crisis in Africa is impacting on so many things, including the economy, the social, the health. We've got the COVID-19 pandemic, which is hanging over. So a quick solution and an effective solution will be something which we wish for Ethiopia. We'll get back to the guests that have given us their all today. We hope to see you again one more time, or twice, or thrice. But when we do meet, we hope that it will be to talk about the after effect rather than the existing issues that we're facing today. Thank you to our viewers, Africans in London Television, Mr. Joseph. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good evening and have a great and wonderful weekend. Over to you, Mr. Joseph.
Thanks, David. Thank you, JJ.
Thank you. Don't go yet. Don't go yet. Now, before we sign off, I want to show you. Yes, many people have actually tuned in to watch, and what I can say, I cannot pronounce your names correctly. That's why I'm avoiding even to start saying.
Oh,
but
no.
but
You're doing well.
yes, but what you have done very well, but I'm always saying this. The conversation continues on social media. You know, that is another way to augment the discussion. This video will also be available on YouTube and, of course, on Facebook. Keep sending us your solutions, ideas, and suggestions of how we can actually improve the program. We cannot do this without you because we are doing all this. We want you to watch. We want you to contribute. Here we are talking as Africans. You see, this is what we want to see. We want to see a panel full of Africans, and I don't care what people are going to say just because now you're. Yes, of course, it has always been 200 years. For 200 years, we have been. Some people have been discussing our affairs, and we don't have any say. But now we have got intelligent people. This is what I have been, this has been all my long ambition, just to see intelligent Africans coming out there, arguing their points, and of course not shouting at each other. That's a good thing. But look, so guys, what I really want to do, I want you to give us a task. There is one idea that I have. I would like to host a virtual conference, not even a virtual conference, it could be a physical conference. We want now to have two sides. The side that supports TPLF, the side that supports the government. Let us meet together. It could be virtual, it could be physical. Let us discuss and come out with ideas. We want actually to show the rest of the world now we can actually discuss our own issues, and we can also come out with our own solutions. So I'm taking the ball back into your hands. Bring your suggestions to me, but I want to do this before the end of August. I really want to have like 10, 20 speakers. They can prepare their stories. Let them, whether from a historical point of view, cultural point of view, or in any way you see fit. This is how we are going to be able to convince people. It pains me to see all these presidents. They are going to the United States, they are going to Arabia, they are going looking for exactly what. Those people do not live in our houses, and they will never live in our houses. They want
correct.
They want to borrow. They want to borrow us money so that we can always keep fighting ourselves over their debts.
Yeah.
So
be dependent.
Exactly. We have to be, but we are on the road of being independent. So
thank you, everyone. Thank you.
We promise you we will prepare the forum. Okay.
Fantastic.
No problem.
Thank you. And
right.
For now, we will see you probably in 2 weeks' time.
Wassy,
Tesfaye, and Zelealem, and David, thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Great job.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.